Hi there, my name's Sarah, and today's tutorial is all about setting up comic panels in Clip Studio Paint. Stay tuned because I'll have a second video about speech bubbles soon. Clip Studio Paint started out as Manga Studio, so it has a lot of features related to comics. In fact, when you go to File, New, 4 of the 6 project types are comic related. FYI, this is a huge subject, so I won't be covering webtoons, printing options like trims and bleeds, or the multiple pages option from EX today. Let me know if you want to see any of that in future videos, though. The comic project type here is pretty good, but it has some limitations, like how you can only set up a file in millimeter units. I prefer to go to the Show All Comic Settings category instead. For this example, I'm going to make a digital comic on a 3000 pixel by 2000 pixel canvas. I'll change the unit to pixels here. I won't be using the trim option since this project will be digital only. I could just turn off the comic settings, but I actually want the inner border. I'll show you why in a moment. To get rid of the trim size, set the bleed width to 0, and then you can set the trim size to 3000 by 2000. The canvas size will update to the same size, and the trim will be out of the way. The inner border is a guide to where your comic frames will go. I'll set it to 2800 by 1800, giving me 100 pixels on each side. Ignore the template option for now, we'll come back to that later in the video. Go ahead and click OK. So here's the canvas. Though, thinking about it, comics usually have a wider margin at the bottom. I'll go to View, and select Crop Marks Inner Border Settings. Here, I'll change my inner border height to 1700, and then add a Y offset of -50 to make up for the difference. Much better. It's also important to know that using options like Change Image Resolution will result in your crop marks and borders being removed. To avoid this, use the Canvas Properties option instead. You can change the canvas size at the top, and down here's another place where you can update the trim and border settings. First, I'll create the comic's frame border. There are 2 ways to do this, but the easiest is to go to Layer, New Layer, and select Frame Border Folder. You can name it if you wish, and these other options are for if you want a border to appear around it. I'll go with a line width of 15. If you want any diagonal panels, turn Anti-Aliasing on. If all your panels will be horizontal and vertical, you can leave it off. I'll actually leave it off so I can show you the effect later. Click OK. 2 things happen. For one, you'll have this frame with a black outline surrounded in blue. Notice that it appears exactly where I set up the inner border. If you try to create a frame this way without an inner border, it'll just go all the way to the edges. The frame appears as a folder here on the Layer panel. The other thing that happened is CSP automatically switched me to the Cut Frame Border tool, specifically this Divide Frame Folders subtool. If I click and drag, my frame gets split along that line. Now I've got 2 frame folders. I'd like a wider gutter between them though, so I'll undo that with Ctrl-Z and change both my vertical and horizontal gutters to 60 each. Click and drag now, and there's a nice gap between them. Keep clicking and dragging, and your frames get divided again and again. Hold down Shift to lock it to vertical, horizontal, or 45 degrees. There are also options next to Shape of Division here that allow you to add jagged frame divisions or curved ones. Oh, and just as a note, if you find you're constantly using the same frame border size, you can go to File, Preferences, and select Layer Frame. Here you can set the vertical and horizontal gutters, then click OK. choose the Space of Frame Border in Preferences checkbox, and it'll just use your preferred gutters as a default. So now we've got a bunch of frames. What do we do with them? You get this null icon if you try to draw on one. The hint is in the name though, they're folders. Create a new layer inside of one, and you can now draw in it. And your drawing gets bounded within that frame. You can put as many layers inside a frame as you want, so you can have one for sketching, line art, and colors, or whatever structure works for you. But Sarah, you might ask, isn't that a lot of layers to keep track of? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's another way to do it too. Here's my original frame border. This time next to dividing method, I'll select this option, divide not folder but frame border. Click and drag, and this time it adds a division between the frames but keeps them in the same folder. Creating a layer in this one and drawing in it shows the difference. You don't see the drawing in the gutter, but you can draw across both panels. You can combine the two methods as well. Return to the frame border tool and change the dividing method back to divide frame folder and duplicate inside layer. Make another division. Now you've got 2 frames on one folder and 1 frame independent of the 2. Notice it also made a copy of the frame's child layer with the drawing. If you don't want that behavior, choose the middle dividing method, divide frame folder and create empty folder, to start with a completely blank frame instead. Frame borders are objects, so to adjust them, go to the Operation tool, and choose our old friend, the Object subtool. Here, you can select an individual frame, or multiple frames by holding down Shift, as long as they're in the same folder. You cannot, however, select frames from different folders at the same time. With a frame selected, you can change its border color, or the thickness using the brush size option. You can also adjust its size, and by default, the program tries to adjust the other frames too, even in different folders. Turn the Keep Gutters Aligned option to None if you don't want this behavior. Note these little yellow arrows too. You can click on them to get rid of the gutters, both between frames and between a frame and the edge of the canvas. This is great if you want a full bleed frame like you see in some comics. You can move a selected frame using the Object subtool, but notice everything inside stays static. If you want to move the whole thing, go to the Move tool, and make sure the Move Layer subtool is selected. Select the whole frame folder, and click to drag it. Obviously, this works best when all your frames are separate folders, and is one reason you might want to use them. As I mentioned before, if you want diagonal frames, you'll most likely want anti-aliasing turned on. I left it off as a demonstration, but when I zoom in, you can see the edges of my frames are jagged pixels. To turn it on, go to the Subtool Detail palette by clicking the wrench icon, then go to Anti-Aliasing. Medium is a good option. Notice it only affects whichever panels you have selected, so if you have all your frame borders as separate folders, you'll need to do this for each one. That's all great for straight edge panels, but what if you want to get creative? Let's return to our empty canvas and select the Frame Border tool. There's 2 tabs up here, and we want the Create Frame tab. With the Rectangular Frame subtool selected, let's click and drag a frame border. It snaps to your inner border if you're close enough to it, but you can make it any size you want. Now, this is very similar to how we created the border before, but here you've got more control. Choose whether to create new frame folders each time, allowing for overlap, or to add new ones to the existing frame. You can also choose if you want a layer and fill already created for you. Go into the Subtool Detail palette and choose Figure, And here you can also add circular or polygonal frames. You can use the Polyline Frame subtool to create jagged frame borders or curved ones. The frame border pen takes it a step further and just lets you draw a frame by hand. Ooh, well, I told you there was a lot to talk about with frame borders, but hang in there, we're almost done. CSP also has a variety of built-in panel templates to get you started. Open the Material panel by going to Window, Material, and choosing any of these options. Open Manga Material and select the Framing Template folder. They're shown in vertical format, but what's really nice is if you click and drag one in, it conforms to your canvas's size. It also respects where you've set your inner border. When you're creating a new comic canvas, you can choose to include one of these templates right from the get-go. But let's say all you need is a simple grid of equal frames. With your frame border folder selected, go to Layer, Ruler Frame, and select Divide Frame Border Equally. Choose the number of vertical and horizontal divisions you want. You can see what Fit to Side Direction of Frame does in the preview when you toggle it. The Divide Folder option is just the same as the dividing methods we've looked at before. Click OK. There you go. Perfect equal divisions. Note it didn't give you an option for the gutter widths. This feature uses what you've set up in Preferences instead. Okay, that's it for this one. I was going to talk about saving templates too, but this is getting a little long and I'll save that for another video. And like I said before, I'll have another tutorial out soon talking about speech bubbles, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Bye for now. A big thank you to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to Nova Tier patron Joe C. Phipps. Check out my Patreon if you'd like to help support future content like this.